Hi, I'm Dr. Fran Macko, and I'm a Professional Development Coordinator with CICERO Systems. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the challenges that students face when reading history. In my experience as both a teacher of language arts and of social studies on the middle school level, I found that there was this interesting disconnect between my students' ability to read fiction and my students' ability to read informational text. When they would come to me for English language arts, they had a fairly good understanding of how to approach fiction. They knew what to look for in terms of story, grammar, character, plot, setting, theme, author's point of view. But when they came to me for social studies and I presented them with a chapter in the textbook, a primary source, they struggled to make meaning. And that led me to think about what are those challenges that students face when they read history texts. What affects the readability? And if we want to move our students towards meeting the Common Core state standards and just make them more effective and better readers of history, what are some of the challenges that we need to think about and address? I've identified a number of them, and I'm going to talk briefly about each. The first one that I think is critical is lack of prior knowledge. And we know the importance of prior knowledge. We know why it's important for students to connect new knowledge to existing knowledge. Sadly, we also know that for many of our students, their prior knowledge in history is either non-existent or very, very weak at best. So the first challenge we have is how do we create that foundation of knowledge for our students so that they have someplace, a scaffold, a framework to place new information. The second challenge that I found with my students, and you may find with yours, is that they're unfamiliar with the text structure, or what we call schema. And as I said earlier, kids are very, very familiar with how fiction is organized. Informational text is organized very differently. It can have one of a number of different organizational patterns, things like cause and effect, description, problem solution, chronology. And often these more than one pattern is evident in any particular text. So when students come to reading informational text, i.e. anything in history, they're often not sure how it's organized. And we know that the way in which a piece of text is organized reflects author's purpose. So what the author is trying to convey is very often connected to how the piece of text is organized. So another challenge is how do we help students understand that informational text is organized very differently from nonfiction or literature. A third challenge that affects, I think, the readability of history text is students having difficulty identifying more important information from less important or subordinate information. And we see this all the time when we ask students to take notes. I used to laughingly refer to it as the journey to adventure, in terms of students either attempting to copy everything or copying random information without a sense of how that information is connected. Why does a textbook have subheadings? What does a subheading mean? How does that organize the information that follows? What are the major ideas in a particular piece? And then what are the subordinate or supporting ideas? And this plays out not only in reading informational text, but when we ask students to write or respond to an essay, where they often have difficulty identifying a thesis statement and thinking about how do we support that thesis. So that idea that some information is more important or prominent and other is less important in the sense that it is subordinate and supports the main idea. A fourth factor that I think is critical is academic vocabulary and concepts. So much of what students encounter when they read history text is academic vocabulary and concept. Okay? And the two are really connected because most concepts are also academic vocabulary. In literature, when students come across a word that is unfamiliar, most of the time it's possible for them to find a synonym that they understand, substitute the synonym, and they get immediate understanding of a particular sentence. That does not always work in history texts, especially with what I call those isms, the big concept words. Things like federalism. There's no one word that you could substitute for federalism where students would immediately understand that concept. A process has to happen there. Students need to look at examples and non-examples to be able to generate a good definition of what that concept word is. So those concepts, that academic vocabulary, often become stumbling blocks, especially in primary sources where there are any number of them. So that's another challenge that we face as teachers. The next challenge is the level of analysis and synthesis. Those are those historical thinking skills. Okay. Going back to the Common Core and thinking about what the Common Core is asking students to do in terms of assessing reliability of a particular document, understanding perspective and point of view, being able to contextualize a document, understanding where it fits in history, what role it played, what its immediate impact was, what its subsequent impact was, to whom it was written, what type of document is it, personal correspondence, public speech, how does that affect what's being said? So there are a whole set of historical thinking skills that students need to understand and apply and hopefully master to be able to be effective readers of history. And the last factor that plays into the readability of history texts are the roles of visuals, things like maps, graphs, charts. Students often think of these the way they think of an illustration in a story. Nice picture takes up space on the page, without realizing that those are sources of information, and being able to develop that visual literacy where students can read and analyze a painting or a photograph or a map or a chart or a graph, a political cartoon, is also critical to helping them be able to effectively read informational text in history. So all of those factors come into play when we have students facing us and we want them to be effective readers of history and thinkers of history. So as teachers, what do we do? Well, there are a number of strategies that we can think about, and I'm sure there are many that you have used, but how do we put this all together in a comprehensive package? One of the things that we offer at CICERO Systems is a comprehensive content literacy professional development package. If you'd like to know more about this and how you can support your students or your teachers in supporting their students to become better readers in content area of social studies and history, check out our website at www.CICEROSystems.com.